My guest today is Sam Cooper, investigative journalist and publisher of The Bureau. We discuss a Trudeau minister's secret trip to Beijing, what was revealed in her comments about the trip, and also the danger TikTok poses to Western democracies. Sam illuminates a number of issues hidden within these recent stories and highlights important details many of us missed. This episode is a condensed analysis of China's growing influence over our rapidly changing world. Stay tuned. Sam Cooper, my brother, well rested, back from vacation. We're both wearing the scruff. I like it. You a little bit more than me, unfortunately. I'm half Native American, so it only grows in patches on my face. But you, with your beautiful full beard.
I'm not that fulsome either. But
well, I do got to say, my Bureau t-shirt came in. My wife loves the way it looks on me. I'm very happy about that. So
that's a great endorsement, man. I think everyone, all couples should buy shirts from the Bureau for each other.
Exactly. Matching Bureau t-shirts. If you're watching this right now, just do it. We're going to work on the Sam Cooper was right shirt. I'm still going to get that done. We got to get those out there. But Sam, my brother, it has been a couple of weeks. I feel naked if I don't talk to you for a while. And it is awesome to have you back, man. I hope your vacation went exactly as planned. And now, it's funny because I was thinking about it the other night. I was thinking about what we were going to talk about. And I was thinking, whenever you go on vacation, the people in the power centers around Canada must be like, oh, he's gone for a few weeks. Okay, let's get back to business as usual.
Yeah. And I don't tell anyone where I'm going unless they're people that I would trust with my life. And there are some people like that. But I can tell you now, since I'm back, obviously I'm dealing with lots of conflict, dealing with a lot of serious things for North America's defense in my life. And I was like, I got those things out of my life. A lot of stress was removed, but driving in southern France totally returned that stress.
I bet the gray in that beard is all French.
It's all from driving in Marseille after landing at that airport.
So we got a lot to catch up on, man. It's so, the world seems like it's moving so fast that, not talking for 3 weeks, we landed an entirely different universe. And we'll start with Melanie Joly, because while you were gone, there was a big controversy around an apparent diplomatic trip that she took to Beijing. And, it's hard relying on media sources because you don't know who to trust anymore. And if Sam Cooper isn't around, I don't know who's telling the truth, right? And so in some mainstream media articles, they were saying that the trip was announced before she left. It was posted on the government website. And other news outlets are saying that the trip was not publicly revealed until after she had left. And some saying even after she had returned. So let's talk about that trip. What in your view was going on there? And we'll talk about how it relates to an earlier trip that you wrote about earlier this week.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it certainly wasn't a highly advertised trip. We can say that for sure. And it shocked people, obviously, because I think it's fair to say, a good range of Canadian commentators said, look, we're still very much seized, as they say, with the investigations into exactly what China did to us. And here, obviously, pretty quietly, if not unannounced, our foreign minister is traveling over to Beijing, and it looked fully like kowtowing, putting out the olive branch to the nation that, if you believe any a tenth of what I'm reporting, which is the same things that are being said in the U.S. State Department, FBI, CIA, DEA, as I've been telling you more and more, China is involved in strategic corruption attacks on nations around the world. Canada is acutely targeted, in the same way that nations of the South Pacific that, hardly have any GDP are targeted. Canada's being targeted by, incredibly nefarious, illicit financial networks that are controlled up and down by the Chinese Communist Party. And as I've said, this directly relates to organized crime and how it works with intelligence. So with all that said, she's going over there pretty much unannounced, and all we have to do is go to the Globe and Mail, which we can all agree is a pretty trusted, you know, the paper of record, or the mainstream paper of record in Canada. So of course, with all this, you know, dust ruckus while she's gone, when as soon as she gets back, Globe and Mail gets the exclusive interview, and I'm just going to read her quote that she told, their top reporter Bob Fife and Stephen Chase. She comes back and she says, yes, she was over there, but it was important for her, quote, "It's more Canadian perceptions toward China, which are negative right now, and it's important for China to understand that." So the nature of her interview, which I call a damage control interview with the Globe and Mail upon return, was, yes, we have some things to raise with regards to allegations of interference. Yes, but trade is very important. The nature of her interview was essentially, we need to get back on track with good relations. And she told them it's more Canadians that have a negative perception towards China than Ottawa. Right. And so, again, a number of media commentators jumped on that comment, which very obviously it fits what I've been telling you in interviews for a long time. This government of Justin Trudeau, all along, has been very favored by Beijing, has wanted to push a free trade deal with Beijing until the Man Wanzhou controversy, put that off track. And there, as we've been talking about, the intelligence I'm reporting is Justin Trudeau is supported by Beijing. I've told you, not only him, but it's very much about, power centers in mostly Montreal. We're talking huge corporations, law firms, a particular corporation that would be, very close to Jean Chrétien, very close to all Liberal prime ministers, but some especially, like Justin Trudeau, Pierre Trudeau, Jean Chrétien, and Melanie Joly being, a protege of Jean Chrétien. So to me, her quote is just reflecting exactly the same message that Jean Chrétien and a number of senior Liberals would have said around, when Man Wanzhou was detained here. Our Michaels were over there. Jean Chrétien came out again in a Globe and Mail report and said, we have to basically, we need to release Man Wanzhou. This isn't working, right? Let's do a hostage exchange. So it's about not holding Beijing to account for their hostile state activity. It's about not, following the rule of law and, as they say, the rules-based international order. It's about Joly saying it's just Canadian perceptions that, 11 Toronto MPs were allegedly colluding, wittingly or unwittingly, with Beijing in 2019. As I've told you, people in the know in CSIS say closer to 40 to 50 MPs targeted by Beijing. That's just MPs. We've heard in NSI Cup 2024 that there's a number of senators working for Beijing. And yet Joly has the temerity to go over there and tell them it's Canadians' perceptions. We're okay in Ottawa, right? So it speaks for itself. To me, it very obviously, as I reported in the Bureau, it raises the suggestion, is she, an emissary for the Canadian people? Or is she quietly going over there, as she did in 2018, as is reported on a Chinese government-linked website that is very connected to the scandals of donations to Justin Trudeau and organized crime networks I've been telling you about? This sort of entity in China back in 2018 arranged, a trade junket that Joly led as heritage minister, involving the Canada-China Business Council. This is this body that represents these Quebec corporate entities, among some others. I'm talking about very broadly. And they met together with what I'm calling, Chinese military intelligence guided entities, right? So what really is the power behind the throne of Liberal prime ministers? If you talk to people in CSIS at a very deep level, which I have had the capacity to do, you got to understand there's industrialists, lawyers, there's whole business networks behind Justin Trudeau, Melanie Joly. And so I'm saying, go to the Bureau, and I can't lay out every detail, every connection in this conversation unless I go to my notepad. But I'm saying her message in 2024 on this, looks like pretty much a secret trip to Beijing is totally consistent with, what she did in 2018. It's totally consistent with the Liberal government and their direction.
Yeah. And that's what I pulled from it too. Just her comments. And this is what confuses me, is like, have we reached a point in our parliamentary democracy where we've elected people who are just unaware of the rules? Because that's what it seems like to me. You look at, like, there have been a few people online who have done big running threads of all of the ethical violations of specifically people in the Liberal Party, but NDP members and Conservative members
Yeah.
as well. And it seems to me like there's only two reasons why this can happen. Either A, they don't care, or B, they don't know. And either way, it's pretty bad.
I would say both of those. I would add a C. The C option is there's no accountability. There's no, I'm working on stories with a CBSA whistleblower that will say, even if the political level did care, at the bureaucratic level, managers are politicized. Um, there are huge indications of corruption, which behind that are indications of corruption related to the worst transnational organized crime. I'm talking about CBSA and hinting at a story I'm working on. But I'm told, again, we've talked before, when you look at these procurement scandals, when you look at things going wrong and getting covered up in government, it looks like there's very much a systematic effort at the bureaucratic level to silence whistleblowers, to punish whistleblowers. And so the lack of accountability goes from it looks like up through the bureaucracy and into the political levels. So I mean, they don't care, I believe, about following ethical guidelines, which, in my view, a lot of this should get into criminality, but it doesn't, because there's no consequences. And the reason there's no consequences is we need an independent, arm's length, anti-corruption, let's just call it commission. One of my back when I was in your neck of the woods in Vancouver, breaking the how China's laundering money through casinos story, which has gone international now. By the way, everyone knows what the Vancouver model is now. Everyone's reporting on this in their own countries. Following my reporting, one of my friends in the U.S. financial world said, "You need a Cooper Commission in British Columbia." Right? Okay, I'll take it. Yeah, we need a Cooper Commission. Let's just call that a catchphrase. I'm going to pat myself on the back because I'm leading the way on this. Independent anti-corruption body, arm's length, not reporting up to Justin Trudeau, not reporting up to David Eby, not reporting up to Doug Ford or elsewhere. National, provincial, to look at, to work with bureaucratic, let's say mid to lower level whistleblowers that are on the front line saying, 300 passports just disappeared, and people are now coming in, from the Ukraine and Russia and Vancouver and, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to report on this. Bad stuff's happening. Whistleblowers are being silenced. It's been going on for 30 to 40 years. I'm saying, as it relates to transnational organized crime penetrating our government. That's the issue. So that was a long answer, but they don't care because they don't have to. The words traitor have come up a lot recently. Again, I did not raise, the words traitor. I've just heard from a CBSA source. I said, what needs to change in Canada? I'm not even talking about the election interference story. I'm talking about CBSA employees allegedly corrupted by organized crime. The person said, we need to do something to the traitors that are being turned by whether it's domestic or foreign bad actors. So that's my answer in more than a nutshell.
Yeah, well, I've kind of been peripherally following the ArriveCan story. And this is a really good example because it's kind of all been laid out there for us to look at. And what it seems like to me is that it's crony capitalism in the dumbest, most socialist Canadian way possible, right? It's not as sophisticated as, say, like the crony capitalism that you find in the United States. It's very basic, and it's very, I mean, for lack of a better word, sorry, Miss Cooper, sorry, everybody who may be offended, it's retarded. When you look at how it worked, when you look at the relationships that GC strategies fostered with people in the CBSA, people within the Liberal government, it's crony capitalism, but it's like you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars disappearing over a weekend in a cottage, right? And nobody's even bothering to really cover their tracks because they think that if there's no paper trail, that nobody's going to ask any questions. And now here we are, right? And we have these parliamentary commissions investigating and examining what happened. And it just seems to me like it's a combination of stupidity, laziness, and, like you said, just no accountability, right?
Yeah, and those stories, like I don't know this yet, but I'm seeing little threads here and there where um, it looks to me possible that you've got sort of groups of bureaucrats, as in that case, that could be sort of fronts. That is, they're profiting. There's incestuous, inner, dealings in government, and behind that, it could be pointing to something I'm working on in separate channels that behind them would be much more nefarious, much more international, much more sophisticated people. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, there's something going on within government where people, either on their own, which could be the case, or through corruptive forces of the worst kind, transnational crime, are banding together to parcel off our taxpayer money
Yeah.
into, this is how, nefarious groups take over governments in Mexico or Cambodia, etc. And I'm just starting to see inklings. I'm starting to puzzle together that picture that this could be what we're talking about at some level in Canada.
Yeah. And, and since talking to you, with these conversations and just doing my own reading, going back to the Melanie Jolie story, Andy Lee posted screenshots from what looks like a Chinese propaganda newspaper where they basically say Melanie Jolie was called back to Beijing to be reprimanded, and they called them dogs for for American interests, and that this time they were using bigger sticks. And you can only take that for what it's worth, right? Because I don't know anything about Chinese media, but the fact that that was even printed is pretty scary, right?
Yeah, you'd have to look at the sources, and it's like when in China, which is completely intelligence controlled, right?
Yeah.
There could be lower level things, and it could be a case where they toss that out there to please some people, and there could be much higher level things, like for example, military intelligence in Beijing wanting to smooth the way back with co-opted, complicit, or unwitting industrialists and politicians and lawyers in Canada. So there could be a number of things going on, but that type of kind of like jingoistic, narrative would
Yeah.
certainly be beneficial to a lot of people, you know, in the same way that unfortunately, American politicians can fool their base sometimes.
Right. Yeah. And so what do you say to people who, look at this recent allegedly secret trip to Beijing and say, well, it's just a diplomatic trip. I mean, she's the foreign affairs minister after all. Because, what I look at, the way I see it is I think that the perspective on situations like these depends on really where your politics lie, right? Because people who are nationalistic will look at this in the sense that I think you and I do, where it's like, well, this is very obviously, we're very obviously being sold out yet again. But people with a globalist perspective view this as just a way of strengthening relations between Canada and China. So what do you say to people who say, well, this was just a harmless diplomatic trip, the same as any other, diplomatic trip a foreign affairs minister would take?
Yeah, I mean, the her comments to the Globe and Mail completely negate any reasonable person can look at that and look at what's happening in Canada, and this is it's not up for debate anymore. Again, as we've talked about, NSI COP 2024, we're talking about collusion, traitors, clandestine transfers to Canadian politicians in money laundering type ways from foreign missions. And so you could have the argument that, like, let's say a David Mulrooney, the former, the now tough talking former ambassador to China that really knows what's going on, if someone like him in a strange world became a liberal foreign minister and went over there and had a very, frank, tough discussion, we're not going to, this is our red line. You're way over our red line. So, of course, at a diplomatic level, we don't want to be at war with you. Let's get things right. But this, and this. But that just doesn't happen with someone like a Melanie Joly or a Justin Trudeau or anyone in his office. As I'm telling you, we heard it in the Hogue Commission. There was like this other PMO official that talked about how the Conservative government prior to the Trudeau government came in and wrecked 10 years of wooing. That's his actual words. Something like 10 years of wooing, in trade relations with China were ruined by the Harper government, right? So it's, I mean, I'm not saying the Harper government completely got it right. What I'm saying is, if you look at a Jolie, if you look at a Jeremy Broadbent, if you look at a Katie Telford, a Justin Trudeau, a Butts, they're all wrong, right? They're so provably wrong, unless you believe that the whole, both the Republicans and the Democrats in the United States have it completely wrong. Australia's got it wrong. New Zealand's got it wrong. Britain's got it wrong. France has got it wrong. If you believe all of that, Germany's got it wrong. Taiwan's got it wrong. Okay. I mean, what kind of person are you if you believe that the Justin Trudeau liberals are the only people in the world that have this right?
Yeah.
Okay. If the U.S. State Department, Anthony Blinken goes over there, they're talking tough about fentanyl, right? I mean, Melanie Joly may drop a little lip service when she comes back, but Canada isn't doing anything on fentanyl. Meanwhile, as I've reported at the Bureau, the US government is going directly after the Chinese state now.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, it just, anyone that makes those arguments, again, I pound my chest a bit and say, okay, come on the Bureau and we'll talk for an hour. I don't think there's anyone in the world that can make that argument with me, just because I talk to too many people in Washington. I talk to too many people in Taiwan that really get it. Maybe people, some people in Canada just would like to be stupid about this. And the people that are making that argument, Jolie, either they don't know or they like to be stupid about it.
Yeah. And, backroom deals and corruption aside, let's say, the people who inhabit the Trudeau cabinet, I don't see anybody in there who I would perceive as ever being strong enough to stand up to somebody like Xi Jinping and tell him face to face what the issues are, right?
No, I don't. There's just no one there. And I mean, it all comes down at a deeper level to, is your government and your party deeply in debt and dependent on United Front fundraisers? Not to get off track, but there's a great story that came out in a New Zealand documentary very recently. I highly recommend it. There's this former New Zealand MP called Jamie Lee Ross. He came out with, he blew the whistle on himself and his party in 2018. And he explained so clearly how it happens that, Chinese intelligence leverages their, communities to make sure that any MP that relies to any sense on those votes has to ingratiate themselves, starts to raise funds. And Mr. Ross, in his interview, just explains how year after year after year, government after government, once you take in all that money, they start asking you, very silently, very, very gently, okay, we want this position. We want this person in cabinet. We want this person in your prime minister's office. We don't want, and Mr. Ross said, okay, if Beijing's doing some encroachments in the Philippines or the South China Sea, we're not going to stand up and say anything because our prime minister knows we've got a big fundraiser with the Chinese community in this MP's riding next week. This is why I don't. It's not necessarily about physical, personal fortitude. Probably it. Well, it would come down to your beliefs and your character ultimately, but they can't say anything tough about Beijing. Let's get back to Melanie Joly's quote. It's about Canadians' perceptions. It's not about what Ottawa thinks about China. That's very negative right now. That's not even true. There's enough people in Ottawa that know what's going on. It's the Trudeau liberals who are deeply in hock to Chinese donors that can't tell China they have anything negative to say about them. This directly relates to what I'm saying. This New Zealand former MP is telling people if they want to look up that story.
Yeah, and I'll try to find that link and I'll post it below this discussion, because I think it's really important. We have a lot of American listeners, and I get a lot of people from the US messaging me going like, what is going on up there? And I have to tell them, hey man, it's happening down there too,
That
right? It's everywhere.
it's
It really is, right?
it's happening, and it's not just the Bidens. It should be Mr. Trump has some issues too. I tell you that I'm in touch with the U.S. intelligence community, and you said before about how you might have some people come on if they could and say,
Yeah.
"Hey, we got a problem in the United States." Yeah, there's stories to come out, and I'm working on them.
Oh, dude, Sam, I love you. I love it. You just make me excited. I start checking the bureau every day just to see where those stories are. Yeah, I mean, it really is a global problem, and it's happening in every Western nation. And it seems like every time you turn over a stone, you find a CCP intelligence agent, right?
We talked before about the Hunter Biden story, and I told you about this. We won't get off track on this episode, but this Chinese fake international oil company and how the people were using it to corrupt Hunter Biden, who called who knew these people are spies. He says it on his laptop, and this same group of people, which I'm saying is the highest levels of Chinese intelligence
Mhm.
using organized crime, etc., tried to get the former CIA director to come over to Beijing and in on it, right? So yeah, they're into U.S. think tanks, they're into U.S. current and former officials, all through. So for our U.S. listeners, yeah, it's not just about what's going on in Canada. Canada's worse. Don't get me wrong; it's a lot worse because, as I've said, the FBI can actually get people. The FBI can get people trying to come in and, well, maybe we don't want to go. What I want to say is the FBI, the DEA, the CIA, they've got human sources and networks around the world. They can disrupt things, and they do. Canada, we're just wide open.
Right. Yeah, and that's the scary part, is that like when I talk to a lot of American academics, I talk to American writers, and they all look at us like Canada is 3 to 4 years ahead of where they're going, and they're terrified. They're
Yeah,
terrified. I mean,
yeah,
they're actually genuinely afraid of becoming what Canada is now, which is, it seems like I mean, in Trudeau's own words, a post-national state without its own identity, to be an empty vessel to be filled with whatever ideology the governing body wants to inject, right?
that's a great way to put it. And my colleague Terry Glavin, had a great Substack post on his The Real Story, and he said, "What does national security mean? What does defending Canada against colluders?" He didn't know about colluders at that point. This was a while ago, and he got it right. He said, "National security is not even possible in a post-national state,"
Right,
right?
right.
Yeah. So whether through naivety or being in on it, both are very real possibilities. Trudeau has opened the door to foreign interference and corruption by being a post-national state,
Yeah,
willfully, wittingly.
yeah. Willfully blind, as we'll
Yeah,
say, right?
willfully wrong. Yeah,
So we've been talking about the NSI COP report, and I kind of want to pivot to that a little bit, because you wrote a piece on the NSI COP 2019 report, and you managed to get your hands on a completely unredacted
yeah.
version of it. Can you talk about what you found in there, and what alarmed you, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, part of my objective with that story is there's a lot of people out there banging the drum, name the names in NSI Cup 2024. And, yeah, there's going to be more stuff in there. But for people that want to know the names, you can read the reporting that I've already done. You can read the reporting that I continue to do on the Bureau, which is leading the way and has always led the way on foreign interference in Canada, because this all starts with the book Willful Blindness. Otherwise, there's no reporting from Global News. There's no reporting from the Globe and Mail. I'm the one that dug in on this story. Okay. So enough said on that. 2019 NSI Cup, I went back to it, in hindsight, in light of NSI Cup 2024, and I looked at some of the most concerning cases. But first of all, I looked at the case that says there are there are politicians from all three major federal parties, right? Liberal, NDP, Conservative, that are involved with foreign states. But this same methods of foreign interference are being replicated across the country to subnational levels, First Nations, provincial, municipal, right? The same, and it's all about China's United Front Work Department and how they surround politicians and foster bonds of obligation, support them, get them into office, and then you get some, quiet quid pro quos. Uh, and so the point of my recent story is there's a key case that says the China, Beijing, is inviting First Nation leaders to go over to China on fake junkets, which are nominally about tourism opportunities. That is, let's boost your economy in the north or in First Nations jurisdictions in Canada by having Chinese tourists come over, look at the Northern Lights or whatever, look at the polar bears. Hopefully, don't go out and shoot them and poach them, which is what is happening.
Really?
It's happening. That's a whole other. That's a whole other big
We'll
story.
leave that one out for now, but that's pretty wild. Yeah.
We'll parcel that one off for the future. But the point of this report, it said Beijing wants Canada's natural resources and the ones that are under or partially under or fully under First Nations Indigenous jurisdiction. Right. So they're going directly at, sort of a government within a government. We all know, our First Nations history and issues we still need to work out for fairness, for, to be a better, stronger Canada. But Beijing has realized that's a lever, and they're going directly at trying to cultivate First Nations leaders to get our natural resources. And this is a huge issue in the Northern Arctic, which is becoming a very, very tempting target for China and Russia. So that's the main point of the story that blew some people's minds. It's like this was basically known by, I'd say, people that watch things closely in the North. But here's this NSI Cup 2019 saying, look, it's not just federal, First Nations targeting, very important. There was another case that I mentioned that I hadn't reported before. In 2013, Beijing supported a British Columbia provincial election candidate, funded them, organized the consul general out in Vancouver, organized community leaders to attend, sort of campaign donation events. And the consul general allegedly tried to cover up that this unidentified BC provincial election candidate is a Chinese Communist Party member. So, right, there's another headline. There's two headlines for that story. Another one, and there's so many, but I will say this. Okay, people that are saying, name the names, tell us the most serious cases from NSI Cup 2024. There's a case, and I'm going to paraphrase, but it comes from a direct quote. It says, a provincial cabinet minister who dealt with most of the issues relating to Chinese foreign officials for their government provided political information to the Chinese government. And this is the key one that people should not forget this quote. And promised to attack their colleagues in a provincial legislature if they raised Chinese human rights abuse issues.
Oh my God.
Right? So let's focus on that one more.
Yeah.
People are saying, name the names. Who are the 11 MPs? I'm saying it's not 11 MPs. We're talking very broad MPs, senators. Some of these people in NSCI 2024 would not be in federal government, right? They'd be in indigenous governments. They'd be in municipalities, Ontario, BC, Quebec, right? So who's this person that promised in a provincial legislature when they were a minister to attack their fellow Canadian elected officials if they rose Chinese human rights abuse issues? Who are they? What influence do they have within some unnamed Canadian political party? Are they deeply involved in fundraising for a Canadian political party? Let's call back to where we started, the quote from Melanie Joly. It's not Ottawa that has a problem with China, it's Canadian perceptions. Maybe Canadians are experiencing things differently. My point here is that, okay, we're getting on a little roll here. This provincial cabinet minister who promised to attack his fellow elected officials on behalf of China, would that not be the definition of a colluder and a traitor at the highest level?
Yes.
I'm asking you if that,
Yes.
this is a quote. Yeah.
Yeah.
So who are they? Who are they?
But, you know, like, look, if you want to ask me, and this is not Sam Cooper saying it, this is me. I want to clarify that because, you know, every week you get, and we'll talk about this later, but every week you get another ball of shit that you have to deal with. For me, I look at just, you know, I mean, let's take the very top level, Justin Trudeau, and, you know, fundraising from, you know, Chinese organizations and fronts for the CCP and the United Front Workers. To me, that's treasonous. To me, that's treason, right? Because you're accepting campaign donations from an organization that is directly connected to a foreign adversarial government. Right.
If you know and you've been told directly about certain people and their proven connection to Chinese intelligence and their role in fundraising, and you continue to open your coffers, right? You may come out and put on like a donation limit of 3,000 per person. You may act like you're doing something after being told, but if you keep going back to the same, you know, people, you're pictured with them, you have fundraisers with them after NSICOP 2024. And I'll say right now, I'm working on an update chapter of Willful Blindness that'll make this a lot more clear. Yeah. I mean, in a real country, if you're told many times that both CSIS and the RCMP have concerns about a person and you continue fundraising with that person, I do think that broaches into the territory of some sort of criminality.
It has to.
I mean, maybe it's illegal. Maybe it's like banned speech to say that in Canada. Maybe I'll get sued for saying something like that. But like, right?
It has to.
What kind of country are we living in if these are the facts? I'm afraid at this point to say names, but I've got facts, right? So let's see where this goes in the years to come.
Yeah, I mean, and again, this is me saying this, but when you have thousands of photos from fundraisers of federal politicians, like the thing that I think we need to understand, and this goes for Canadians, Americans, people in Britain who may be listening to this, people in New Zealand, everywhere in the world, Australians, if your elected officials are, you know, going out to dinners and accepting donations and standing next to organized crime figures and people who are intelligence agents for adversarial nations, right? This isn't, I mean, even if a Canadian politician took a dinner with, say, like the head of the Italian mafia in New York, we'd all be like, what is going on? Right.
Exactly.
And that's exactly where we are. Right. Like,
or the Hells Angels.
Right. Or the Hells Angels, or name any organized crime group. But because these people are in suits, they appear to be official or bureaucratic in some manner. It's just, it's overlooked. And we have mountains of evidence. I mean, people listening, go and read the Bureau, just or pick up Willful Blindness. But like
And let's not forget the stuff circuit, their interview with this New Zealand MP, Jamie Lee Ross, which points to the high level United Front leaders in that country, the exact same things I've been talking about. These people aren't secret. They're pictured at meetings with Xi Jinping, right? So yes, not just the Bureau, not just willful blindness. Let's put that link at the for this
yeah,
episode.
I
Yeah,
will.
because it shows people. Sometimes you have to shake your head and go, is this happening in Canada? And is it happening only in Canada? No, it's happening exactly the same way as NSI Cup 2019 says in Australia and New Zealand. And yet Canadian officials are up there, as NSI Cup 2019 says, well, they're not, we're not facing it as badly as Australia and New Zealand. No, I'm sorry. I think we're facing it worse.
Oh, 100%. And for people listening to this, just to kind of frame it, because the other thing I get a lot from people is, well, how does this impact me? And I tell them it impacts every aspect of your life, every inch of it, right? When you have a foreign adversarial government who is pulling the strings on the government that is responsible for collecting your taxes, for providing certain services and programs, for building out and repairing your infrastructure, this impacts everything. But if you want just a very micro example, think of somebody that you know who's addicted to fentanyl, because we all know somebody somewhere who's either done fentanyl, died from fentanyl, or think of somebody who overdosed on it. A friend of yours who was at a nightclub and did a bump of cocaine in a bathroom that was laced with fentanyl. I know at least 4 people that happened to, right? And they died on the spot. You have this entanglement between our federal government officials, allegedly, and the CCP and CCP connected organized crime to thank for that, right? That there is your example, right? We have. I was reading the figure the other day. I think it was like 200,000 people so far this year. I can't remember the exact figure, but it's a very high figure of people who have overdosed in the United States from fentanyl already, dead, gone, right? And we have those connections to thank for that, right?
As we've talked about, now the US government is saying just focused on the fentanyl. Yeah, the Chinese Communist Party wants people to be dying in North America. They want to profit from the precursors that China makes. They're working with the Mexican cartels. As I've reported, they're working with the triads and everyone in Canada. And China, is laundering the money around the world. The US government, as we've said, is saying senior Chinese communist officials are directly involved in those money laundering operations. And the other point that we pushed on, bringing it back to your point about why should we care about foreign interference or hostile state activity, the leading edge of thought across the US government now, so we're talking State Department, CIA, FBI, DEA, Justice Department, is China uses illicit crime networks around the world to gain economic influence and power in foreign nations and use that as levers. So that speaks to the fentanyl overdoses. That speaks to housing affordability, whether you're in Vancouver or a South Pacific island that now has a casino and you can't afford a home around it anymore.
Mm.
This is what's going on. And so I think what you're pointing to is a lot of people might think, I care about the Olympics, but am I international enough to care that my MP can't stand and vote, for a motion to call the ongoing genocide in Xinjiang, call it out? So a lot of people would say, look, man, life is tough. I got to focus on my own family.
Mm.
I got to focus on my own entertainment. I got to get by. Fair enough. And they'll say that vote on the Uyghurs, I don't care that much. But you brought it home, and this is my message, right? Fentanyl, housing affordability, your politicians being owned, uh, the deeper things about why Huawei and TikTok might not seem to matter that much now, but when a geopolitical event happens and China has the button to put something out on TikTok, so that now your kids come home thinking that us defending Taiwan would be a very bad idea, right? These are things that are down the road that people don't know yet. I don't think many people know yet why TikTok and Huawei are so important, but I think I know. U.S. intelligence, CSIS thinks they know.
So let's travel down that road for a sec. I know we're running out of time, but you wrote a piece on TikTok last week, and and let's talk about TikTok. Why is TikTok important? Why is it such an important issue for us here in the West?
Yeah, I mean, so everyone with a family and some teens or kids knows that we could go, we could go down the path of, why are, girls and young women feeling so depressed these days. That's another topic that has some rigorous reporting on it.
Mhm.
But TikTok as an app, an amazingly built and entertaining innovation. But the problem, according to Western intelligence, is like even if this brilliant innovation by some Chinese tech company uh, in itself was good, it can't be good because the company is directly under the control of the highest levels of Chinese intelligence. And there's evidence of that, as the US government has moved to take actions against TikTok, which are controversial. Don't get me wrong. It's a very tough and sensitive area. But the evidence is, the founder of the company that controls TikTok, believe it's called ByteDance, was brought to heel under the Chinese intelligence laws, and he said, "Look, we didn't properly understand that our content needs to be in line with." The positive energy of the Chinese socialist vision. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but that's pretty much exactly what he said. They have the records. So I'm going to I'm going to add 4,000 new censors to our media, universe so that we can make sure we fall in line with Chinese Communist Party dictates, right? So why does that matter to 170 million Americans that use it? What's being said by U.S. intelligence and now in the U.S. courts is that the US government has classified intelligence that Beijing has already been using and censoring the content of TikTok outside of China in ways that the filings suggest can be used to interfere in other countries. And so the US government filings that I wrote on said essentially, Beijing has hackers and intelligence in critical infrastructure in the United States. So when something bad happens, their strategy and their capacity is to, let's say, shut off the lights, turn off the power, turn off your phones. They're trying to do that. And TikTok was compared in the same way. Beijing has full intelligence control of that entity. So at a time of their choosing, they can weaponize TikTok and use it for their purposes by either amplifying certain messages or suppressing others. And the filings say this can be used in election interference, to interfere in our political discourse, any manner of ways, right? And so I wish that the filings would not have been so redacted. But if I have to guess, because they refer a lot to Taiwan, it could, let's say that Beijing throws a blockade around that wonderful democratically ruled island. This would, seize about 40% of the world's economy and shipping traffic, I'm told. It's a warlike activity. And what could happen on TikTok? Suddenly you could see all these videos about, why Taiwan belongs to Beijing and
Right.
it's Western, encroaching on the CIA is all over Taiwan. They're behind this, right? You can just see how they can control. We've talked before about who's behind these campus protests at McGill or at the U of T or in America. I was saying, I think it should be Iranian intelligence and the United Front probably in there. We now have some reporting from a colleague suggesting at McGill it's Iranian intelligence, right? So in the same way, our political discourse can be controlled on campuses. It could be controlled on TikTok. That's a long answer, and it's getting into that very tricky area of free speech, and you're going to take you're going to take control of a foreign company and hand it to a US custodian. But I just think it speaks to the nature of where we are in our world, where we could be approaching like World War III like possibilities.
Yeah.
We're already in sort of hybrid war situations. So I think that's what the US government is saying, and there'll be more to come out. So I'm reserving judgment, but I'd say from what I've seen now, this is the right move by the US government.
I agree. It's funny because we were talking about this offline before we started today, and I think it brings up a lot of questions about free speech. But I think in this circumstance, it's not the free speech isn't in question here. It's a platform that's owned by a potential enemy on the battlefield in a future world war, right?
Yes.
It would be like if Nazi Germany owned a popular newspaper, and we
Yeah.
were like, well, free speech. It's like,
We're
well,
in a kinetic war.
right,
Let's just say we were in a kinetic war with the Nazis, and they had control of our film screens where everyone had to go to get news on the war,
right.
right? So what would happen with TikTok if you believe the U.S. government, and if you believe me, if you believe CSIS? It's just like the level of control is incredible of what they could do, and beyond that, focused on young generations is an interesting thing as well.
Of course, and it's no secret that the algorithms purposely boost and intentionally boost left-wing propaganda and leftist ideology, right? And so, TikTok has become the biggest purveyor of a dangerous communist ideology, and almost like a pipeline into Western minds, into Western households, more effective than any book or film could ever be, right?
The possibilities are totally there for what the sort of experts in Taiwan that I've been interviewing and doing stories on say that Beijing, remember, this is coming from, Chinese ethnic people in Taiwan are telling me Beijing has a sick capacity for shifting thinking, cognitive warfare, controlling what a population thinks. And so
Mm.
that's exactly what you pointed towards. And I mean, for the people that are arguing, like, how the heck could this is un-American to take away control of a company? Okay, so we can solve that very quickly if Beijing drops its firewall and allows Twitter, sorry, X, or any other company allows the bureau to report very freely within mainland China. Okay, we've got reciprocity. I can criticize Xi Jinping, right?
Yeah.
And your citizens can read it. You can say whatever you want on TikTok at this point. You can say Bin Laden was a freedom fighter and hero and elevate. Okay, so fair enough here, fair enough there.
You know, I don't think Beijing is in your travel plans anytime in the near future, but I would love to see Sam Cooper from the ground, surrounded by armed guards with an iron dome over top, reporting live from Beijing.
I can I can only go over there in a U.S. Air Force jet. I've been told that
You
I
better.
can't. I cannot. I've been told very explicitly not to go to certain countries, and China's one of them.
I would imagine. So on that note, before we wrap it up here, something I did want to address a little bit, because every time I put out an episode with you, I get comments and DMs from people saying, Sam Cooper's a liar. He's a shill. He's a CIA plant. He's being sued into oblivion. And I want to address it because, first of all, I want to say this to people. I can sue anybody, any day, anytime, right? If I have lawyers, I can sue anybody I choose whenever I want to. There's no limit to the amount of lawfare that I can bring onto somebody for really no reason whatsoever, right? And Sam, you are obviously, very much in the crosshairs of some very dangerous people, right? And people who wish you weren't doing the work that you're doing, because you are absolutely right. A lot of what we know is you are responsible for a lot of what we know about what is happening in our country and what is happening in the world around us. You single-handedly, who We don't have to get into it, but your name is, been scrubbed from certain reporting that you've done on this stuff. And so I know that this is a very touchy subject, and I know that this is something that you can't really talk about in terms of details. But do you want to address that, the lawfare that has been exacted against you from a number of directions, and just the way that you've been handling it?
Um, yeah, I'll give a limited answer on that. But on lawfare, I mean, one, people contacting you and saying that I'm being sued is completely consistent, with the messages I was getting at the Vancouver Province, Vancouver Sun, Global News. It's very difficult. Very fortunately, there have been some monumental stories reported. So for people that say that they pick out me and say that he's being sued into oblivion. Certainly, there's people that may be trying to silence me or sue me into oblivion, but the stories being reported, again, look at NSI Cup 2024, look at the official Hogue Commission interim report. Numbers of government reports have come out and said the reporting is they were charged to look at the allegations in the reporting, and the reporting, 11 MPs, 13 campaign staff, clandestine transfer, amounts, phone calls occurred, all kinds of things proven to be accurate. So there's still going to be people that are out trying to clear their name, or push back and say this, that, and that. Um, that's our legal system. They can do that. But what I'm saying is this is already proven as some of the most consequential and accurate reporting in Canadian history that has already driven some of the most consequential moves for legal reform in Canadian history. And I'm saying stay tuned, because more and more will be proven because the reporting is truthful. Now, on the point of lawfare, I mean, let's get off myself. Are people talking about the Globe and Mail being sued for $250 million with something like over 20 employees named in a lawsuit? This is a lawsuit that relates to what we've been talking about. I've been careful not to name some names, but it relates to people surrounding Justin Trudeau in 2016 in very key cash for access donation situations. I've told you that people I've named, some of them pointed to, would be connected to a casino in Markham, or would be, alleged Chinese intelligence connected fundraiser used for very special operations. Okay, so I won't ramble around it too much. The Globe and Mail was sued for 250 million, and within that, what I can see looks like just a throw all kinds of garbage at the wall, hoping something sticks lawsuit. They name, they suggest a guy named Calvin Krusty is like a source of all this information, which I know nothing about, certainly not a source of my information. So the most I'll say is there's a very interesting line or two in that lawsuit that then says completely opposite of this $250 million suit about a bank called Wealth One, which denies any wrongdoing, by the way. It goes out and says this guy Calvin Krusty is like providing information about current and former RCMP officers in a negative way. So I'm going, what the heck is that, and what does it have to do with the Wealth One story? It looks really like obviously to me that it has to do with this Billy Miker alleged traitor story and a couple of cops surrounding him. So why is this then just getting tossed against the wall in a lawsuit on something different? They're targeting this Calvin Krusty guy, who's certainly a strong voice against China and talking about transnational crime, and very conversant with the people in U.S. intelligence kind of community that I, have some capacity to talk to. Could it be that this garbage that comes out in these lawsuits or these legal examinations, like Calvin is trying to hurt the reputations of some former police officers? To me, that's suggesting, okay, China's throwing something against the wall, or Billy Mike or his friends throwing something against the wall. I've seen garbage on WeChat channels saying things like, a notorious reporter was fired after reporting this, pointing to myself. And I've seen lawyers have asked me that. I've told them that is complete Chinese intelligence, provable garbage. So if you want to talk about lawsuits, anyone else there that's watching this, keep saying these types of things about me. And when I have the time and it's the right time, you're going to be paying out the mouth because let's just be very clear. I chose to run the Bureau so I could continue doing the best reporting in Canada. I was repeatedly encouraged to apply for a senior reporting position and get a raise at Global News. And I exercised my judgment that there was a better place for me to be at the Bureau. That's it. So that's my last message. Anyone out there that wants to believe lies and repeat Chinese intelligence propaganda, keep doing it. I've got the receipts, and you're going to pay if you're important enough to me.
I love it when Sam Cooper gets gangster. The hairs on my arms stood up. Damn, Sam.
It's
I,
provable. So people just like
yeah.
govern yourselves accordingly, as the lawyers say. That's what I'm telling the lawyers.
Yeah. I mean, look, the truth is that if you weren't telling the truth, if the things that you were reporting were provably false, there would be no reason to sue you, right? I mean, they're coming after you because of what you're exposing. And, I mean, dude, I kiss your ass at the end of every conversation we have, but you are the most important voice in this country. I mean, in my opinion, you're probably, I mean, in a small group of really most important journalists in the world right now. And they're coming after you because of that, because of your integrity and because of your legitimacy. And I thank God every day that you didn't take that job at Global News, because I guarantee you, a lot of what you're reporting at the Bureau wouldn't pass at Global News or anywhere, right? Editors wouldn't let that shit get by. I've worked with editors before. I know how they operate,
my
right?
point my point on this is willful blindness is the bible of this, right? There's no NSI Cup 2024 without willful blindness. People in positions, Canada and elsewhere, came to me because, as they say, I know what they know, and I taught them, right? This is why Canadians now know that we have alleged colluders, because willful blindness is the first step towards that. And as I've said, it continues to be reported at the Bureau. And you're right. I mean, to be a little philosophical, I've got a lot to thank for my Canadian media jobs, done a lot of good work, and get to a certain level and a certain capacity. And then it's time to say, okay, that's great. Do your thing. I'll do my thing. I'll keep going. And like, as I've said before, I'm looking at people like Eric Blair, George Orwell, Ernest Hemingway, Dostoevsky would be my models, not someone that, is reporting for X media company in, wherever they are. There are bigger things to report on. And that's why I continue that's why I started the Bureau.
And that's why we love you, Sam, because you really could have been um, another talking head. You really could have been some high paid, I wouldn't say shill, but conduit for uh, certain bits of actual misinformation and disinformation at probably any media outlet you chose. The background that you're standing in front of right now could be a mansion, and you chose this route because you have integrity, and that's why the world loves you, man. Sam, dude, we didn't even talk about your podcast episode with Kevin Vuong, but everybody listening, go and listen to that podcast episode at thebureau.news. Sam, is the podcast something that you're going to be doing regularly, or just whenever inspiration strikes? Or
I'm gonna keep up these talks, which we've got a channel where we can explore, and the back and forth is providing a lot of value, a lot of information, a little bit of entertainment. So this is going to keep going. Uh, One day we'll both be wearing the Bureau while doing this. Yeah, yeah, and I splurged out on my riverside, following your example, so I can now do a high quality talk when I want to talk to a Kevin Vaughan. And yeah, people look, Kevin, Canadian independent MP, he's been through some serious stuff. He's got a story to tell, whether you believe it all or not. He's right at the center of some big things going on. And we talked for an hour, and he dropped some bombshells. And just, you know, go watch it and make up your mind.
Yeah, two takeaways for me from that conversation. Both of us as married men, I thank God I chose the right one, because holy smokes, that guy's life was turned upside down. And number two, the last 10-15 minutes or so, there's something there. And Sam, I'm not going to spoil it. People listening, when you hear it, you're going to be like, whoa. And
Yeah, let me. Uh, yeah, let's leave it to people to go. And then maybe we'll unpack it at a later date. But I raised the point that it's reported that a defector to Australia working for Chinese intelligence has come forward. Reportedly, they'll share information with the Hague Commission this fall. And the story talks about how this person says he was targeting dissidents, Chinese dissidents that had relocated around the world to infiltrate their groups. And a poor guy, that was an enemy of Xi Jinping, dies off the coast of Vancouver in a kayaking accident. And the information has come out that China was very much, following him in Canada. So that and other cases in Australia, New Zealand, raised a lot of questions. And I asked Kevin, what does he think about, do we need a deeper look into some things in Canada? And let's leave a cliffhanger about his answer, which I don't know, but he raises something.
yeah, and let's just say the answer is one that is cause for pause, right? And some contemplation. So, Sam, before we go, can you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yep. You look at your shirt right there, the Bureau. You go there, thebureau.news, where I'm reporting on a weekly basis, big stories, and at Scooper Cooper on X, where, if I'm feeling it, sometimes I'll air out a thread of hip hop and 90s alternative, or just give some commentary.
Yeah, and you might even get a "come at me, bro" here and there, because Sam's starting to get a little bit catty and impatient. Well, Sam, man, I'm so glad you're back. I'm glad we're doing these again. Dude, I don't feel right doing this podcast if I don't talk to you in a couple of weeks. And for lack of a better phrase, my friend, you complete me. So, yeah. Sam, man, as always, brother, thank you for your courage, your bravery, and just your integrity, man. I mean, everything. I think you and I have about 10 hours, 5 to 10 hours of material recorded. And sometimes I go back and listen to it and I'm like, oh, the things that you're bringing to the world, man. It's scary, but this is must know information. And without you, we wouldn't have it. So as always, my brother, thank you. We'll book the next one in and we'll talk again soon.
See ya.